My name is Crystal, and I am 32 years old. All my life, I tried to be the perfect daughter to a mother who never thought I was good enough. No matter how hard I worked, how much I achieved, or how much I sacrificed, nothing ever pleased her. Last year, I spent weeks planning her lavish 60th birthday celebration, hoping finally to earn her approval. Instead, she stood up during dinner, raised her champagne glass, and announced to everyone that the best birthday gift would be if I left her life completely. So I did exactly that. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever felt rejected by someone who should have loved you unconditionally. I grew up in an affluent suburb outside Boston in a large colonial house with perfectly manicured lawns that matched our family's carefully cultivated image. My mother, Diana, was a highly successful corporate attorney, known for her ruthless efficiency in the courtroom and her elegant dinner parties at home. My father worked as an investment consultant, which meant he traveled constantly and was rarely present for the day-to-day realities of our family life. When he was home, he typically retreated to his study, leaving me alone with my mother and her impossibly high standards. From my earliest memories, nothing I did was ever quite right in my mother's eyes. If I brought home an A-, she would ask why it was not an A+. If I won second place in a competition, she would point out the girl who won first. My childhood became an endless pursuit of a perfection that always remained just out of reach. Crystal, stand up straight. No one respects a woman who slouches, she would snap at social gatherings, adjusting my posture with a firm hand on my back. Crystal, that answer was adequate, but surely you can be more articulate, she would say when I answered questions from her friends, making me feel small and incompetent. In contrast, my younger brother Jake seemed to effortlessly win her approval. He was 3 years younger than me, with the same golden blonde hair and blue eyes that my mother had. From the beginning, they shared an easy rapport that I could never achieve with her. When Jake brought home a B on his report card, my mother would ruffle his hair and say, "That is fine, sweetheart. You will do better next time." When I questioned this double standard, once my mother coldly replied, "Jake has natural charm. You need to work harder to compensate for what you lack." Despite this obvious favoritism, I never resented Jake. How could I? He was just a child receiving the love every child deserves. Instead, I doubled down on my efforts to win my mother's approval. I still remember the art project incident when I was 11. I had spent weeks working on a mixed media piece for the school art show, staying up late every night to perfect it. When it won first prize, I was ecstatic. Finally, I thought my mother would be proud. But when she saw my creation displayed prominently at the school, her lips tightened into that familiar line of disapproval. "This is amateur at best, Crystal," she said within earshot of other parents. "The colors are garish and the concept is derivative." That night, I found my artwork in the garbage bin behind our house. When I confronted my mother, tears streaming down my face, she simply said, "It embarrassed our family. The Andersons' daughter creates much more sophisticated work, and she is 2 years younger than you." Despite these constant emotional wounds, I continued striving for her approval. I graduated as valedictorian of my high school class, only to have my mother critique my speech as overly sentimental. I was accepted to Harvard on a partial scholarship, but instead of congratulations, my mother informed me that I would need to pay for the remainder myself, as I was not worth the investment. I worked 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a 4-point GPA, graduated with honors, and secured a position at a prestigious marketing firm. Through it all, I told myself that one day I would finally do something that would make my mother proud. That one day she would look at me with the same affection she showed Jake. That one day I would be enough. Even as an adult with my own successful career in marketing, I organized my life around trying to win my mother's approval. I scheduled my vacations around her convenience, altered my appearance based on her preferences, and even ended a relationship with a wonderful man because my mother thought he was not ambitious enough. 2 years ago, when my mother was diagnosed with minor heart issues, I immediately moved back to Boston to help her despite having built a promising career in New York. It was not a severe condition, nothing life-threatening, but she made it clear that as her daughter, it was my responsibility to assist her. Jake, who lived just 30 minutes from our mother, was too busy with his own life and career to help much, which my mother completely understood and accepted. I took a lower-paying job in Boston, found an apartment near my mother's house, and became her part-time caretaker, personal assistant, and emotional punching bag. I managed her appointments, organized her medication, handled her finances, and endured her constant criticism, all while telling myself that this was my chance to finally earn her love. The heart issues improved within 6 months, but my role as my mother's personal assistant continued. I kept thinking that if I just did enough, if I just sacrificed enough someday, she would see me as worthy of her love. Looking back now, I can see how deeply unhealthy this dynamic was. But when you grow up starved for a parent's approval, that hunger can distort your entire perception of what love should look like. When my mother's 60th birthday approached last year, I saw it as the perfect opportunity to finally win her over. I would throw her a party so spectacular, so perfectly aligned with her tastes and preferences, that she would have no choice but to acknowledge my efforts and perhaps finally express some gratitude or affection. I spent 3 months planning every detail. I researched venues until I found an exclusive historical mansion that could be rented for private events, one that would impress even my mother's snobbish friends. I hired her favorite chef Antoine, who had previously cooked for celebrities and politicians, to create a custom 7-course menu featuring all her favorite dishes. I commissioned a local artist to create personalized place cards and menus with hand-painted watercolor designs of my mother's beloved garden roses. For the guest list, I tracked down old colleagues from the beginning of her legal career, sorority sisters she had not seen in decades, and even her favorite professor from law school. I arranged for a string quartet to play during cocktail hour and dinner and hired a jazz band for dancing afterward. The flowers alone cost me nearly $4,000, as I ordered rare out-of-season blooms that my mother had once admired in a luxury magazine. All of this was funded from my own savings money I had been putting aside for years, with vague thoughts of someday buying my own home or taking an extended trip to Europe. But what did those dreams matter compared to finally winning my mother's approval? Throughout the planning process, my mother found endless faults with my arrangements. The venue, despite being one of the most prestigious in Boston, was trying too hard to be impressive. The menu, despite being created by her favorite chef, needed multiple revisions because she suddenly decided she no longer liked certain ingredients. The guest list was missing important people, though when pressed, she could not specify who these people were. "I just expected better from you, Crystal," she would say, with that familiar disappointed sigh. "After all, planning events is what you do professionally, is it not?" My best friend Taylor, who had witnessed my relationship with my mother for years, tried to warn me. "Crystal, honey, nothing you do will ever be good enough for her," Taylor said gently one evening, as I frantically revised the seating chart for the 3rd time based on my mother's vague complaints. "You could give her the moon, and she would criticize you for not including the stars." "You do not understand," I insisted. "This time it will be different. This party will be absolutely perfect. She will have to see how much I care." The morning of the big day, I arrived at my mother's house at 7 a.m. to help her prepare. I had hired a professional makeup artist and hairstylist to come to the house, arranged for a custom-made dress to be delivered, and even ordered a special breakfast from her favorite bakery. My mother answered the door in her robe, looked me up and down, and frowned. "Is that what you are wearing to help me get ready? Those jeans make your hips look even wider than usual." I swallowed the hurt, as I had done countless times before. "No, Mom. I brought my dress for tonight. I just wore this to set everything up." As the hairstylist worked on my mother's silver blonde hair, arranging it into an elegant updo, my mother continued her critique. "Crystal, did you confirm that the champagne will be properly chilled? Last time you arranged an event, the wine was room temperature. So embarrassing." "Yes, Mom. I confirmed everything yesterday and again this morning." "And you are certain Antoine is using the wild-caught salmon, not that farm-raised garbage?" "Yes, Mom. He triple-checked." This continued for hours as we prepared. Nothing was quite right. Nothing met her standards. By the time we arrived at the venue, my nerves were frayed and the event had not even started yet. As guests began to arrive, I noticed my brother Jake strolling in 45 minutes late, giving my mother a casual kiss on the cheek. He had contributed nothing to the planning or execution of this event, yet my mother beamed at him. "Jake, darling, you look so handsome in that suit," she cooed, straightening his already perfect tie. "Thanks, Mom. Sorry I am late. Traffic was crazy," he said, as if this minor inconvenience was a tremendous hardship he had overcome. "Of course, sweetheart. I am just glad you are here now," my mother replied with more warmth than she had shown me in our entire 3 months of party planning. Throughout the cocktail hour, I rushed around ensuring everything was perfect while trying to maintain a calm facade. As I passed by a small grouping of my mother's friends, I overheard her talking about me. Crystal, yes, she organized this. She tries so hard, poor thing. Always has. But between us, she lacks that natural sophistication that Jake inherited. Still, she is useful for these sorts of practical matters. I froze a tray of canapés in my hand as those words washed over me. Useful. That was all I was to her. A useful tool, not a beloved daughter. Taylor, who had been helping me despite not being invited as an official guest, saw my face and quickly pulled me into the hallway. "What happened?" she asked, concern etching her features. I repeated what I had overheard, tears threatening to spill. "Crystal, why do you keep doing this to yourself?" Taylor asked, her voice gentle but firm. "This woman is never going to appreciate you the way you deserve." "She is my mother," I said, as if those 3 words explained and excused everything. During dinner, I watched my mother holding court at the head table, charming everyone around her. She was in her element, the center of attention, radiating confidence and grace. No one looking at her would ever guess the cold, critical person she became behind closed doors. When it came time for gifts, I presented her with the rare first edition book I had spent months tracking down, a copy of her favorite novel from college that she had often mentioned losing during a move in her 20s. I had contacted rare book dealers across 3 continents before finding it, spending far more than I could afford. She opened the package, glanced at the book, and gave me a thin smile. "How thoughtful," she said flatly, before quickly moving on to Jake's gift, a hastily purchased designer scarf that immediately drew exclamations of delight from her. As I watched my mother effusively thank Jake for his minimal effort, while my months of planning and my thoughtful gift were barely acknowledged, something inside me began to shift. A small voice whispered that perhaps Taylor was right. Perhaps nothing I did would ever be enough. But even then, I was not prepared for what came next. As dinner was winding down, and the servers were preparing to bring out the elaborate 3-tiered cake I had special ordered from an award-winning pastry chef, my mother stood to make a speech. The room quieted as she tapped her crystal champagne flute with a silver spoon, everyone turning expectantly toward her. She looked stunning in her midnight blue gown, her silver hair elegantly styled, diamonds glittering at her throat and ears, gifts from my father years ago. At 60, Diana Anderson was still a striking woman, commanding attention and respect with her mere presence. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "Looking around, I see so many faces that have been part of my journey these past 6 decades." She proceeded to thank various people, acknowledging old friends, mentioning Jake several times, and even thanking the caterer and the venue staff. Not once did she mention me or my role in creating the evening. As she continued speaking, I noticed she was on her 4th or 5th glass of champagne, her cheeks flushed slightly, her gestures becoming more expansive. My mother rarely overindulged, and I felt a twinge of unease. 60 years, she mused, swirling her champagne. What a journey it has been. Successful career, beautiful home, wonderful son. Again, no mention of her daughter. "Many of you have asked what I want for my birthday," she continued, smiling at her rapt audience. "What does one want at 60? She paused dramatically, looking around the room, her gaze sweeping past me as if I were invisible. "You know what would be the best birthday gift?" she said, her voice suddenly taking on an edge that made my stomach clench. "If Crystal would finally stop trying so hard to be part of this family and just leave me alone." The room fell silent. Not the comfortable silence of people listening attentively, but the shocked, horrified silence of witnesses to a car crash. Every event, every holiday, every family gathering there, she is trying so desperately to be included, to be important. My mother continued, gesturing vaguely in my direction without actually looking at me. "It is exhausting, honestly. Always needing approval, always underfoot." I sat frozen in my seat, unable to move, unable to breathe. The room tilted around me, faces blurring as tears filled my eyes. I felt Taylor's hand find mine under the table, squeezing hard, anchoring me to reality. I looked desperately toward Jake, hoping my brother might intervene, might say something to stop this public evisceration. But he sat uncomfortably in his chair, eyes downcast, saying nothing. "So yes," my mother concluded with a laugh that cut like glass, "the perfect gift would be some peace and quiet." Less desperation, less neediness. She raised her glass. To 60 more years, hopefully, with more space to breathe. People lifted their glasses automatically, though many looked uncomfortable, stealing glances at me with expressions ranging from pity to morbid curiosity. No one spoke up. No one contradicted her. In that moment of silence, their complicity felt like a secondary betrayal. Diana sat down to scattered awkward applause, apparently oblivious to or unconcerned by the damage she had just done. The conversation around the tables slowly, uncomfortably resumed, with people studiously avoiding looking in my direction. Crystal Taylor whispered, still clutching my hand, "Let us get out of here." I shook my head slightly. I would not give my mother the satisfaction of seeing me flee in tears. Instead, I excused myself, calmly walked to the restroom on legs that felt disconnected from my body, locked myself in a stall, and silently fell apart. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made it difficult to breathe. All those years of trying, all that desperate hope that somehow, someday, I would be enough, all shattered in a single, casual public humiliation. As I sat there, sobs racking my body, something strange happened. Beneath the pain, beneath the hurt and humiliation, I felt something new stirring. Anger. Not the fleeting irritation I had felt before, quickly suppressed in my desperate attempt to keep peace, but a deep, cleansing rage. How dare she? How dare she treat her own daughter this way? How dare she take my love, my effort, my very self, and throw it back in my face as if it were garbage? In that moment, sitting on the closed toilet lid of an expensive venue, bathroom tissues clutched in my trembling hands, I made a decision. I would give my mother exactly what she had asked for. I would give her the gift she wanted most. I would leave her life completely. When I returned to the party, my face freshly washed and makeup repaired, Taylor looked at me with concern, but something in my expression must have alarmed her because her eyebrows rose slightly. "Crystal, what are you thinking?" she whispered as I took my seat. "Nothing yet," I replied calmly, "but I will let you know." For the remainder of the party, I wore a pleasant, distant smile. I danced when appropriate, chatted politely when engaged, and performed all the expected social niceties. But inside, I was already gone, already planning. My mother had made her wishes abundantly clear, and for once I would fulfill them perfectly. I left the party early, pleading a headache. No one questioned it, not after what had happened. I kissed a few cheeks, smiled my polite, empty smile, and slipped away while my mother was surrounded by admirers, not even bothering to say goodbye to her. She did not notice my departure. In my apartment that night, I did not cry. I did not fall apart. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and began making lists, researching options, creating a plan. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. First, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did. Then I made an appointment with a lawyer I had networked with at a marketing event months ago. Teresa Ramirez specialized in family law and estate planning, and I had a feeling I would need her expertise. 2 hours later, I sat in Teresa's sleek downtown office, laying out the situation in clinical, unemotional terms. "So you want to completely separate your financial and legal ties from your mother, Teresa?" asked, her expression professionally neutral despite the unusual request. "Yes, completely and permanently. What do I need to know?" Teresa walked me through the legal ramifications of what I was planning. As it turned out, my involvement in my mother's affairs was more extensive than even I had realized. Over the years, she had made me a signatory on numerous accounts, named me in legal documents, and entangled our financial lives in ways that would take significant effort to unwind. "This will not be simple," Teresa warned, "and your mother will definitely notice." "That is the point," I replied. I spent the next 3 days executing my plan with methodical precision. I contacted a real estate company that specialized in quick sales and listed my condo. The Boston housing market was hot, and they assured me they could close within 2 weeks, even if it meant accepting slightly less than market value. I did not care. Money was not the point. Next, I resigned from my job, effective immediately. My boss was shocked, offering more money, more flexibility, anything to keep me. I thanked him politely but firmly declined. I had already accepted a position with a smaller firm in Seattle, a job I had applied for and interviewed for remotely, all within 48 hours. The most complicated part was untangling myself from my mother's financial affairs. Over the years, she had made me responsible for paying her bills, managing her household staff, and overseeing various investment accounts. I had signature authority on several of her accounts, ostensibly for convenience, but in reality because she could not be bothered with such mundane matters. I closed every joint account. I removed myself as signatory from all her personal accounts. I resigned as officer from the small family foundation she had established as a tax shelter. I transferred my shares in the family business to a holding company that would manage them without my direct involvement. For accounts where I could not remove myself without her signature, I froze them, requiring her to visit the bank in person to reestablish access. I canceled the credit cards I managed for her household expenses. I terminated the contracts with her housekeeper, gardener, and personal chef after paying them generous severance from my own funds. Throughout it all, I ignored the increasingly frantic calls and messages from my mother. I had nothing to say to her. She had made her wishes clear, and I was simply fulfilling them. The only person I kept in my confidence was Taylor. I met her for coffee on the third day of my plan after most of the major pieces were in place. "Are you sure about this, Crystal?" she asked, concern evident in her eyes. "This seems extreme." "She asked for it explicitly," I replied, stirring my latte calmly. "In front of 60 witnesses. She said the best gift would be for me to leave her life. I am just giving her what she wants. But completely disappearing, selling your home, quitting your job, moving across the country." I looked at my oldest friend, the one person who had consistently been in my corner, Taylor. I have spent 32 years trying to earn that woman's love. 32 years of never being good enough, never measuring up, always falling short. She humiliated me publicly on the one night that should have been about appreciating my efforts. I am done. Completely done. Taylor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I understand, and I support you. Just promise you will stay in touch with me." "Of course," I assured her. "You are the only one who gets my new contact information." The day before I was scheduled to leave, I went to my mother's house when I knew she would be at her weekly hair appointment. I used my key, the one she had given me for emergencies, only though she frequently called me over for matters as trivial as changing a light bulb or finding a misplaced pair of glasses. I walked through the immaculate rooms, taking in the familiar surroundings one last time. The formal living room where I was never allowed to play as a child. The dining room where countless family meals had been critiqued and found wanting. The kitchen where I had tried and failed to learn my grandmother's recipes under my mother's impatient instruction. I left my key on the marble countertop along with the few family heirlooms my mother had reluctantly given me over the years, items I had once cherished as rare signs of inclusion, but now recognized as the hollow gestures they were. My final stop was my brother's apartment. Jake was surprised to see me, his expression immediately guarded. "Crystal, is everything okay? Mom has been trying to reach you." "I know," I said, stepping inside when he reluctantly widened the door. "I am not here about that. I came to say goodbye." "Goodbye? Where are you going?" I explained my plan in broad strokes, not giving specific details about where I was going or what I would be doing. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Crystal, you cannot just disappear. Mom needs you. Who will handle all her affairs?" It was telling that his concern was for our mother, not for me. "She has you," I pointed out, "and she has made it very clear that you are the only child she wants in her life." She did not mean what she said at the party. You know how she gets when she drinks too much. No, Jake, she meant every word. Alcohol does not create feelings, it just removes the filter. What she said is what she has always felt. "So you are just going to abandon her? Abandon me? Abandon our family?" His tone was accusatory, as if I were committing some great betrayal. "There is no family to abandon," I said quietly. "There never really was." I left him standing in his apartment doorway looking lost and confused, a grown man who had never had to face the reality of our mother's true nature because he had always been on the receiving end of her preferential treatment. The next morning, I boarded a plane to Seattle with 2 suitcases containing the distilled remains of my life. Everything else had been sold, donated, or discarded. As the plane took off, I looked down at the city disappearing beneath me. the only home I had ever known fading into the distance. I felt terror at the unknown future ahead. But alongside that fear was another emotion, one so foreign I almost did not recognize it. Freedom. Seattle welcomed me with 3 days of continuous rain, as if the city were determined to wash away any remnants of my old life that might have clung to me during my journey west. I checked into an extended stay hotel and began the process of building a new life from scratch. Finding an apartment was my first priority. I secured a small but modern one-bedroom in a neighborhood called Fremont, known for its artsy vibe and famous troll sculpture lurking under a bridge. It was as far from the stately cold perfection of my mother's Boston home as I could get, and that was exactly what I wanted. My new job at a boutique marketing firm specialized in promoting sustainable businesses was a significant step down in prestige and salary from my previous position. I went from being a senior account manager handling million-dollar clients to a mid-level strategist working with local businesses and startups. But the office culture was refreshingly supportive, with colleagues who actually acknowledged good work instead of just expecting perfection. The first week away from Boston passed in a blur of practical matters. Setting up utilities, buying basic furniture, learning the bus routes, finding the nearest grocery store. I kept my phone off most of the time, though occasionally I would power it up to find dozens of missed calls and messages from my mother, ranging from demanding to pleading to threatening. I did not respond to any of them. Taylor kept me updated via email, our agreed-upon method of communication that would leave no traces of my new phone number or address. "Your mother showed up at my apartment yesterday," she wrote 5 days after I left. "She demanded to know where you were. I told her I did not know specifically, which is true, since you have not given me your exact address. She did not believe me. It got ugly. She threatened to sue me. Can you believe that? For what she could not exactly say." A week later, another update from Taylor. "Diana seems to think this is just an extended tantrum that you will get over. She told mutual acquaintances that you are being childish and will come crawling back when you run out of money or realize how difficult life is without her connections. She does not seem to understand that you are actually gone." But that illusion of control did not last long. By the second week, the reality of my absence began to hit home for my mother. "Your mother tried to access the Johnson account today to pay for some charity gala table," Taylor reported. Apparently, the account was frozen and she had to spend 3 hours at the bank sorting it out. She came out looking like she had seen a ghost. The next day, the caterer called your mother, asking for payment information for next month's standing order. She had no idea what they were talking about or how to handle it. Apparently, you have been managing all that for years. And then Diana's birthday gifts to her society friends were all returned due to payment issues with the credit card. She had to explain to Judith Thornton why her anniversary present was sent back. Apparently, it was mortifying. Each update revealed another thread of my invisible support being noticed only through its absence. For years, I had quietly managed countless aspects of my mother's life, enabling her to maintain the perfect facade she presented to the world. Without me, that facade was beginning to crack. Jake predictably was struggling to fill the gap I had left. According to Taylor, he was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of details I had handled, details neither he nor my mother had ever bothered to notice or acknowledge. "Jake called me asking if I knew which company handles your mother's house insurance," Taylor wrote. "Apparently, it is up for renewal, and they have no idea who to contact. I suggested he check her filing cabinet. He said he did, but everything is organized in some system he cannot figure out." Of course it was. I had created that system, meticulously maintaining it for years, another invisible service taken for granted. As my mother's perfectly managed life began to unravel, my new life was slowly taking shape. I found a therapist, Dr. Vivian Chen, who specialized in family trauma and emotional abuse. Our first session was a revelation. "What you are describing is not normal mother-daughter conflict," Dr. Chen said gently after I recounted some of my childhood memories. "It is a pattern of emotional abuse and narcissistic behavior." But she never hit me. I found myself saying the classic defense of the emotionally abused. Physical abuse is not the only kind of abuse, Crystal. Emotional abuse leaves scars too, they are just not visible. Those words hit me with unexpected force. Abuse. I had never allowed myself to use that word, never permitted myself to see my mother's behavior in that light. It had always been my failure, my shortcoming, my inability to be the daughter she wanted. To reframe it as her failure to be the mother I deserved was both terrifying and liberating. In Seattle, I began building a social circle, something I had never prioritized in Boston, where my life revolved around my mother's needs and my desperate attempts to earn her approval. I joined a hiking group, took a pottery class, and became a regular at a local coffee shop where the baristas soon knew my order by heart. Slowly, cautiously, I started to discover who Crystal Anderson was when she was not defined by her relationship to Diana Anderson. 1 month after my departure, Taylor reported a significant shift in my mother's attitude. "Diana is starting to panic," she wrote. "She tried to contact the family attorney about some trust issue and discovered you had removed yourself as trustee. She spent all day calling different law firms trying to figure out how to undo what you have done. No one could help her without your cooperation. 2 months in, your mother cornered me at the Thompson fundraiser. She actually had tears in her eyes, Crystal. I have never seen her cry before. She asked if you were safe, if you were okay. For the first time, she seemed more concerned about you than about the inconvenience your absence is causing her. 3 months, Diana has started telling people you are taking an extended sabbatical at her suggestion. Apparently, she is revising history to make your disappearance her idea. Classic Diana, but there is something sad about it too. I think she misses you but cannot admit it even to herself." Reading these updates produced complicated feelings. Part of me, the wounded child still desperate for maternal love, felt a vindictive satisfaction. See, I mattered after all. Another part felt a deep sadness for the relationship that never was and now never would be. But increasingly, the dominant feeling was indifference. As I established my new life, as I made friends who valued me for who I was rather than what I could do for them, as I excelled at my new job, where my contributions were actually recognized and appreciated, my mother's opinion of me began to matter less and less. The most startling moment came 6 months into my new life. I was having dinner with a new friend, Zoe, who had quickly become close to me through our shared love of obscure documentaries and spicy food. She asked about my family, a topic I had been vague about until then. This time I found myself telling her the whole story, including the birthday party disaster that had finally pushed me to break free. "Wow," Zoe said when I finished. "Your mother sounds like a real piece of work." "She is," I agreed, and then realized with surprise that I had used the present tense. For the first time, I had talked about my mother without feeling that familiar knot of anxiety and inadequacy in my chest. I had simply stated a fact without emotional charge. "You know what is weird," I told Zoe. "I do not miss my old life at all, not one bit." And it was true. Somewhere along the way, without noticing the exact moment it happened, I had stopped looking backward and started looking forward instead. The realization was both surprising and deeply satisfying. That night I emailed Taylor, "I think I am actually happy here. Not just getting by, but genuinely happy. Is that strange?" Her reply came quickly. "Not strange at all. It is about damn time." 6 months and 2 weeks after I left Boston, Taylor sent me an urgent email. "Crystal, your mother hired a private investigator. I just thought you should know." I stared at the message, feeling oddly calm. I had known this might happen eventually. My mother was not someone who accepted defeat easily, and in her mind, my disappearance was not a response to her cruelty, but a challenge to her authority. I had not been particularly careful about covering my tracks in Seattle. I had not changed my name or avoided using my credit cards. I had not hidden from social media, though I was selective about what I posted. I was not running or hiding. I was simply living my life away from her influence. So when I looked up from my computer at work 3 days later to find my mother standing in the office reception area, I was surprised only by the timing, not by the fact of her appearance. Diana Anderson looked both exactly the same and somehow diminished. She wore an expensive tailored suit in her signature navy blue. Her silver hair perfectly styled her posture impeccable as always. But there was something different about her eyes, something I had never seen before. Uncertainty. "Crystal," she said, her voice, carrying across the open office space, causing heads to turn. I stood slowly, conscious of my colleagues watching with curious expressions. "Mother, this is unexpected. We need to talk." she stated, as imperious as ever, despite being the one who had tracked me down across the country. I am at work, I replied calmly. I have meetings all afternoon. Something flickered across her face, frustration, or perhaps disbelief that I was not immediately dropping everything to accommodate her. This is important, she insisted. So is my job, I countered. I can meet you after work if you want to talk. There is a cafe 2 blocks south, Harper and Stone, 6 p.m. She looked as if she might argue, but then nodded stiffly. Fine, 6 p.m. As she turned to leave my supervisor, Megan approached my desk. Everything okay? She asked quietly. Family matter, I explained. Sorry about the disruption. No problem, Megan said easily. Take the rest of the day if you need it. The contrast between Megan's supportive attitude and what would have been my mother's reaction to a personal matter intruding on work time was not lost on me. Thank you, but I would rather focus on work until our meeting, I said. And I meant it. I needed the normalcy of my job to ground me before facing Diana. At 5:45, I arrived at the cafe deliberately early to claim the best table 1 near the exit, but not too close to other patrons. My mother arrived precisely at 6, her sense of punctuality, one of her few qualities I had chosen to retain. Crystal, she said, taking the seat across from me, her eyes scanning my appearance with that familiar critical assessment. I was wearing jeans and a simple blue blouse, standard casual attire for my new workplace, but a far cry from the polished business attire I had worn in Boston. You look, she began, then seemed to reconsider whatever she had been about to say. Healthy, she finished, as if this were a great concession. Thank you, I said neutrally. Would you like to order something? We went through the motions of ordering coffee, the mundane ritual, providing a brief buffer before the inevitable confrontation. Once our drinks arrived, my mother wasted no time. This has gone on long enough, Crystal. It is time for you to come home. I am home, I replied simply. This is where I live now. She made a dismissive gesture. Do not be ridiculous. This is not your home. Your life is in Boston. Your job, your condo. She paused, a flash of anger crossing her features. Or at least it was before you impulsively sold everything and ran away like a teenager having a tantrum. I sipped my coffee, considering my response. 6 months earlier, that comparison would have cut deep, triggering all my insecurities about being immature, inadequate, unworthy. Now it barely registered. I did not run away, Mother. I gave you exactly what you asked for. You said in front of 60 people that the best gift I could give you was to leave your life. So I did. You know I did not mean that, literally, she snapped. I had too much champagne. People say things they do not mean when they drink. No, they say things they do not have the courage to say when sober, I corrected gently. You meant it. You have always meant it. I just finally listened. Her composure slipped, then frustration breaking through the polished exterior. Do you have any idea what you have done? The accounts you froze, the arrangements you canceled, the chaos you left behind? It has taken months to sort out the mess you made. I did not make a mess. I simply stopped cleaning up yours. That landed like a slap. Diana Anderson was not accustomed to direct confrontation, especially not from me. I had to hire an accountant and a personal assistant, she continued, ignoring my comment. Do you know how difficult it is to find reliable help? The woman they sent cannot even properly organize my calendar. That sounds challenging, I said, without offering to help or apologize. My mother stared at me, seeming genuinely baffled by my lack of response. For the first time in my life, I was not rushing to fix her problems, not eagerly offering my services, not desperately trying to earn her approval. Crystal, this has gone far enough. You have made your point. Whatever grievance you think you have, consider it acknowledged. Now it is time to come back and resume your responsibilities. I have responsibilities here, I said. I have a job, friends. Commitments. Playing at having a life, you mean, she said dismissively. This is not real, Crystal. This is just an extended vacation from reality. No, Mother. Boston was not real. My life there was a fiction, a performance I put on trying to earn love that was never going to be given. This, I gestured around me, this is real. For the first time in my life, I am living authentically. Diana's expression darkened. I did not fly 3,000 miles to listen to self-help nonsense. I came to bring you home. Why? I asked directly. Why do you want me back? Is it because you miss me, your daughter, or because you miss all the things I did for you?" She did not answer immediately, and her silence told me everything. "I have lost business connections because of you," she said, finally. "The Whitmores dropped me from the hospital foundation board. Apparently, how one treats their children matters to some people." Her tone suggested this was an unreasonable position. "That must be difficult for you," I said, still not offering the apology or capitulation she clearly expected. "Crystal." Her voice took on that commanding tone that had always made me snap to attention in the past. "I am your mother. You owe me respect and consideration." "Respect is earned," I said quietly, "and consideration goes both ways. After everything I have done for you, I gave you life. I provided for you. I raised you with every advantage." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "You provided material advantages, yes. What you never provided was unconditional love support or basic kindness. You treated me as an extension of yourself at best, and as a disappointment or inconvenience at worst." Diana's face flushed. "That is absurd. You are being melodramatic. Am I name one time you expressed pride in me without qualification? One time you supported my choices without criticism? One time you put my needs before your own?" Again her telling silence. "You do not want me in your life," I continued gently. "You want what I did for you. The convenience, the free labor, the emotional punching bag. That person does not exist anymore. So this is it. 30 years of family ties severed because of one thoughtless comment." Her voice had lost some of its hard edge, taking on a quality I had never heard before. Vulnerability. "It was not one comment," I said. "It was a lifetime of comments, criticisms, and conditional love. The birthday speech was just the final confirmation of what I had always suspected but never wanted to believe. You do not love me. Not really. You just used me." To my shock, tears welled in my mother's eyes. In 32 years, I had never seen her cry. "That is not true," she whispered. "You are my daughter." "Being biologically related does not automatically create love," I said. "Love is shown through actions, through respect, through kindness. When have you ever shown me those things?" A tear slipped down her cheek, leaving a track in her perfect makeup. "I do not know how to fix this," she admitted another first. Diana Anderson had never acknowledged being unable to solve a problem before. "I am not sure it can be fixed," I said honestly. "Some damage cannot be undone." She stayed in Seattle for 3 days. Each day we met for increasingly longer conversations. On the second day, Taylor flew in to support me, her presence, a steadying influence as I navigated these unfamiliar waters with my mother. "She seems different," Taylor observed after meeting us for dinner, "less certain of herself." Losing her personal assistant, social secretary, and emotional doormat all at once was apparently quite the shock, I replied dryly. On the third day, my mother and I met at a quiet park overlooking Puget Sound. The setting could not have been more different from our formal interactions in Boston, and perhaps that helped facilitate a different kind of conversation. "I have been seeing a therapist," my mother said abruptly, staring out at the water rather than at me. "Dr. Levinson suggested I might have something called narcissistic personality traits." She said this with the same tone she might use to report a minor medical condition, clinical and detached. "That makes sense," I said carefully. "He says I likely inherited these traits from my own mother." She glanced at me briefly. "Your grandmother was not an easy woman. You never knew her at her worst." I had only vague memories of my grandmother, a stern woman who died when I was 8. This glimpse into my mother's own childhood was unprecedented. "That does not excuse how you treated me," I said, "but it helps explain it." "No, it does not excuse it," she agreed, another unprecedented concession. "Dr. Levinson says I need to acknowledge the harm I have caused if there is any hope of rebuilding." We sat in silence for several minutes, the sound of waves filling the space between us. "I am not coming back to Boston," I said finally. "Not to live, not to work for you, not to resume our old relationship." She nodded slowly. "I understand that now." But I continued, surprising myself. "I am willing to try to build something new, something healthier, with boundaries and mutual respect. If you are willing to do the work." Diana Anderson, who had spent her life demanding perfection from others while exempting herself from any expectations, looked at me with an expression I could not quite decipher. "I would like to try," she said, her voice lacking its usual authoritative certainty. "I do not know if I can change at my age, but I would like to try." It was not a Hollywood moment of reconciliation. There were no tearful embraces, no declarations of undying love. But it was perhaps something more valuable, an honest recognition of reality and a tentative step towards something different. As she prepared to return to Boston the next day, my mother asked, "Will you at least answer my calls now?" Sometimes I replied, "When I am ready. And I expect you to respect when I need space." She nodded, accepting limitations from me for the first time in our relationship. "Goodbye, Mother," I said at the airport departure gate. "Goodbye, Crystal," she replied. Then awkwardly formally, she leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Take care of yourself." "I am," I assured her. "For the first time, I really am." 1 year after I left Boston, my life in Seattle had taken on a comfortable rhythm. I had been promoted to strategy director at the marketing firm, leading a team of 5 and handling some of our most innovative clients. My apartment, once a sparse temporary space, had evolved into a true home, filled with artwork from local artists' plants that somehow thrived despite my initially haphazard care and furniture chosen for comfort rather than to impress anyone. More importantly, I had developed genuine friendships. Zoe had introduced me to her circle of friends, a diverse group of creative professionals who accepted me without question. We had movie nights, went hiking in the magnificent Washington wilderness, and celebrated each other's successes and supported each other through setbacks. My relationship with my mother had evolved into something I never could have imagined. We spoke on the phone once every 2 weeks, conversations that were sometimes strained, but increasingly genuine. Diana continued her therapy, and while change did not come easily to a woman in her 60s who had spent a lifetime building walls around herself, small shifts were noticeable. She asked questions about my life and actually listened to the answers. She caught herself when she began to criticize or control. Sometimes she even acknowledged when she was wrong, a concept that would have been unthinkable in the past. "Dr. Levinson says I use criticism as a way to maintain distance and avoid vulnerability," she told me during one call. "Apparently, I have been doing it my entire life." "That sounds accurate," I said, allowing myself a small smile at her tone of discovery about something that had been painfully obvious to everyone else. I maintained firm boundaries. When she slipped into old patterns, I gently but firmly called her on it. When conversations became too draining, I ended them politely but definitively. I visited Boston once, a tense 3-day trip, where I stayed in a hotel rather than my mother's house, meeting her on neutral ground for limited periods each day. The most surprising development came from my brother Jake. 6 months after my confrontation with our mother, he called me out of the blue. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble when I answered. "I never understood what it was like for you growing up. I never wanted to see it." "It was easier not to see it," I acknowledged without rancor. "You were a kid too, Jake. We were both trying to survive in our own ways." "But I continued the pattern as an adult," he insisted. "I let her treat you like that. I benefited from it. I am sorry, Crystal. Truly." His apology meant more to me than I expected. Jake and I began rebuilding our relationship tentatively at first, then with growing openness. He visited me in Seattle twice, and during his second visit, he brought his new girlfriend, Samantha, a warm, straightforward woman who seemed to genuinely like me. "Jake talks about you all the time," she confided over dinner. "He really admires how you stood up for yourself and made a new life." It was not easy, I admitted, but it was necessary. Perhaps the most significant change in my life was my relationship with myself. Through continued therapy with Dr. Chen, I began to unravel the complex web of self-doubt, perfectionism, and people-pleasing that had defined me for so long. "You were conditioned to believe your value came from what you could do for others, particularly your mother," Dr. Chen observed during one session. "Breaking that pattern means learning to value yourself intrinsically, not for your usefulness." It was difficult work challenging years of ingrained beliefs. There were setbacks, days when I slipped into old patterns of seeking external validation or questioning my worth. But gradually, steadily, I began to develop a sense of self that existed independently of others' opinions or approval. I even began dating again cautiously at first, hypervigilant for signs of criticism or control that might trigger old wounds. But Ryan, a kind, thoughtful architectural photographer I met through Zoe, proved to be patient with my hesitations and respectful of my boundaries. "I like who you are," he told me simply after I shared some of my history with him. "Not what you can do for me, just you." On the anniversary of my departure from Boston, I received an unexpected package from my mother. Inside was the first edition book I had given her for her birthday, the gift she had barely acknowledged. A note was tucked inside the cover. "I did not appreciate this when you gave it to me. I did not appreciate many things about you. I am trying to do better. Happy new beginning, Diana." Not love, Mom, or anything overly sentimental or false. Just an honest acknowledgement and a modest step forward. It was in its way more meaningful than any effusive declaration would have been. That evening, as I celebrated my new beginning anniversary with friends at my favorite restaurant overlooking the water, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The birthday that had broken my heart had also paradoxically freed it. In asking me to leave her life, my mother had inadvertently given me permission to find my own. The pain had been excruciating, the public humiliation devastating. But from that lowest point had come the courage to finally break free from patterns that had held me captive for decades. Our relationship would never be the fairy tale mother-daughter bond I had once desperately craved. Diana Anderson was still Diana Anderson, capable of kindness, but also still learning the most basic elements of healthy relationships at 61. But we were building something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed, something based on reality rather than fantasy, on boundaries rather than servitude. More importantly, I had built a life for myself that was genuinely mine, filled with people who valued me for exactly who I was, not for what I could do for them. I had learned that self-worth comes from within, not from the approval of others, even those who should love us most. Sometimes the greatest act of love is walking away until you are respected. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start over. And sometimes the most powerful words you can say are not "I love you" or "I forgive you," but simply, "This is not acceptable to me." As I looked around the table at my friends raising glasses to toast my Independence Day, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey was not over, the healing not complete. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I was exactly where I needed to be, becoming exactly who I was meant to be. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could have given myself. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who should have loved you but only caused you pain? What would you have done in Crystal's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to choose yourself sometimes. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it. You are enough exactly as you are.